Hello, everybody. Good morning. I am getting situated here. And if you are joining us, I'd love for you to share a little bit of where you've seen what we call glory sightings, but where you've seen beauty, truth, goodness, uh, love in the world. Um, Trying to get set up so I can see your comments here, hopefully, as people start viewing. Uh, where have you seen beauty, truth, goodness, love, joy in the world? Um, so, as you guys begin to share that a little bit, I guess it's a place where I've seen beauty, truth, goodness in the world, and that is we have officially moved to the Three Springs area. Uh, we got connected through really just a spirit opening a door to a place that worked out really well. And even though moving is always stressful, we were able to move in on the 20th and leave like a week to clean out our old place, which is pretty much cleaned. And moving is always fun. So, so much fun. When's the last time you've moved? Might be another question. When's the last time you moved? I don't see any comments. If you're joining us, write something. Let me know you're there. And Facebook and everything is funky lately. It's different and it's throwing me off. So, dang it, I don't see. I see Scott liked it, but that's all I see. So if you're watching, let me know you're watching. And actually, I might just try to pull it up on my phone here for a second, and that might help as well. Yeah. So, where have you seen beauty, truth, and goodness in the world? And so, yeah, we're in a new place. Only there's boxes everywhere. We haven't hardly started unpacking. We've been focusing on cleaning our old place. As anybody who has moved knows and understands that aspect. So, when is the last time you moved? What have you learned through moving? What would you never do again? Maybe you have a funny story. I will say we moved. Well, we moved here just about a year ago, back here, and that transition was interesting in its own ways. But we moved to Seattle 2 years ago from Phoenix, and we we had pulled the car in the back of the U-Haul, and I had moved the car off to the front of the house, and I was trying to get the trailer off of the back of the U-Haul just so I could start to unload. And so I try to take the trailer off and maneuver it, thinking, oh, I should be able to kind of like hand maneuver it. It was a lot heavier than I thought, and I couldn't do it. So then I tried to put it back on, and it wouldn't latch. And so I started to back up to try to get the ball and the hitch to kind of latch on, and I couldn't. I couldn't do it. So, all right, I see some comments here now. All right, they're coming up. Anyways, I couldn't get it, and I got distracted. I had to go in for something, and I came back out, and I started to back up the truck and trailer because I was going to maneuver it and back it back in the other way. And as I was backing up, we were on this hill, and there was houses and cars parked down the hill. And as I was backing up, I was like, oh, I forgot to latch, make sure it latched. So I started pulling up to kind of like gently pull up and then make sure it was latched. And as I'm pulling up, I look in the mirror on the side, and I see out of the mirror, I see the trailer start cruising down the road. And this is the first day, well, I was the day after, but we spent one night, and I see the trailer, and for a split second, my heart started racing, thinking about worst case scenarios of like moving into a brand new place, a brand new church, community, all this stuff. And that just smashing the whatever out of all these cars and stuff. Thankfully, it just coasted and was at an angle enough to just coast and then kind of get into our neighbor's ditch. And so it was one of those crazy things. So All right. Good morning, Jill. 2 years ago, Eureka, California. Jan, Raymond, watching. Oklahoma. Thank you for watching. Mary and Jan, Scott, Joe, and Cheryl. Thank you guys for posting, letting me know you're watching. We're glad to have you with us today. We're going to talk about ego and spirit. So we've been talking about the Enneagram, and let's just say this: the Enneagram is complex. And I've been a part of facilitating a small group with Tammy Bradshaw on the Enneagram, and some people get confused and maybe a little bit frustrated in the beginning. Like, I don't even know myself. What type am I? And your Enneagram doesn't define who you are, right? And it's also complex. It's a tool, and it's a complex tool. So it's okay if you don't find your type right away. This past week, we talked about types too, the helper and the givers. And I have a lot of really good friends that are type twos. Twos definitely show that they care about you. They're often the first to help, offer help when you need help. They're the first to show up when you need somebody to show up. And they're motivated by wanting to help other people. I mean, what a great motivation. And what the Enneagram does as a tool is also it helps you understand your motivation and ways that can cast a shadow as well. And so the shadow aspect, which every type has, every person has, the shadow aspect is sometimes there's a hidden motivation behind that of I want you to need me because I feel that sense of importance and identity from that. And so there's this hidden pride, not an overt pride like I am the best, I am number one, anything, but there's this hidden pride of like, oh, you need me, you have to have me, and there's that sense of importance there. And Jill, 30 years since you moved. Well done there. It's no fun, so you don't want to move anytime soon. So hopefully you're going to stick around. Yeah. So today, as we talk about the type 2, the scripture for this week's meditation, or today's meditation, sorry, Thursday, July 23rd. It's we misprinted it as July 30th. Sorry about that. It's July 23rd. Is on Galatians chapter 5. And if you're reading along, the text is really geared towards 5 verses 22 through 26, which is the fruit of the Spirit. But to give you a little backdrop, if you zoom out a little bit to read through Galatians 5, the Apostle Paul is wrestling with what a new community will look like in the midst of a new sort of movement that is different than the old, that's a part of the old, a part of what has existed, but something has shifted. And so Paul especially is trying to navigate almost two worlds, the Jewish world, which he was very much a part of, and the Gentile world, and trying to not just appease everyone, but saying, yes, but yes. And they don't have to come together in the same way, meaning Gentiles don't have to convert to become Jews. The law is not what saves you. Following the mission, the life, the teachings of Jesus is what it's all about, which is available for everyone at all times, right here, right now. There's nothing you need to do, thank goodness, if you know what I mean, to enter into the sort of Jewish world. You can remain a Gentile, and God is doing this thing here. And so a lot of it in Genesis, or Galatians, 5 is about freedom. Christ has set us free. It is for freedom. You don't have to go back. You don't have to live in bondage. And then he continues on, and subtitled in many translations, the works of the flesh. And some people have pointed out, I think, pointing to the fact that sometimes this might not be the most helpful translation to say flesh, because it makes it, again, seem like the body, the material is bad, and the spirit or the spiritual is good. And that is one of the first heresies actually within the church, was this sort of disconnection between the body and the material and the spirit, and one being evil and the other being good. And that's not, I don't think, what Paul is getting at here. And so some have talked about what might be better translations, one being perhaps the ego. We all have this ego. within us. Ego sometimes is deemed as bad or sinful or whatever, and I don't think that is necessarily the case. At least that's not where I sit. But I do think that our ego wants to be center stage. And then when our ego is center stage, that leads to all kinds of things that are destructive. Again, the Enneagram, using that for the type 2, when the ego is center stage, pride begins to come out. Maybe not again overtly, but the sense of pride, the sense of I'm important in people's lives, they need me. And then the 2, the helper, will find their identity in that role. Well, what happens when people don't need you, or there isn't a place for you to help? Can you find your identity with just being? Right? And all of the Enneagram types will do this in different ways. And so the Enneagram as a tool is meant to expose where your ego tends to want to rule, to be the center. This week, we'll talk about the type 3. Type 3s want to be seen as successful and achieving and driven in that way. No, that's great, right? We need people to be effective to achieve things. The shadow aspect of that then will be that there is the sense of sometimes deceit, not like overt lies, but like, let's just get on to the next thing. Let's just accomplish it. Let's get through. We don't need to spend more time trying to make sure this is better. We need to do something else, something more, something else. And sometimes too, the 3 can do things just for appearance, just to be seen as successful. Now that's the shadow side. Again, we all have the shadow side and we all have the good side. A healthy 3 will do things, will achieve things, will get things done, but won't. We'll be aware of that tendency and says, no, I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to cut corners here. I'm not going to do this just to be seen as successful, but I am going to get it done, right? As somebody who different Enneagram types struggle with doing. They're what's called doing repressed. As one, I think it's the 4, 5, and 9s are kind of doing repressed. That means we all think, feel, and do, but we do it in different orders. So I will feel, then think, then feel, then think, then feel, then think, and then do. Eventually, I'll get to the doing, right? But 3s are they'll do first. They'll do first. So they're great doers in that way. Hopefully this is making sense and you guys are following me a little bit. But what I really wanted to get at today, I'm a little bit scattered. I'm exhausted. I'm feeling my age, which some of you might find funny because maybe you think I'm young, but I don't feel young right now. Moving has paid a toll on my body. And for the first time, I really am feeling it. So the last few days have been not as much sleep and achiness and a little extra stress. So if I seem a little spacey, it's because I am spacey. So I would like to read Galatians 5:16 through 22, but change the vocabulary from flesh to ego and see what happens. Again, understanding the ego as when it is ruling, when it is center, it brings on different things. And so the question then, what we hope the Enneagram does is help you bring greater awareness to your own ego, to your own struggles, to that own shadow aspect that we all have. So let's jump in verse 16. Paul is writing, saying, live by the Spirit, I say, do not gratify the desires of the ego. For what the ego desires is opposed to the Spirit, and the Spirit desires is opposed to the ego. For these are opposed to each other to prevent you from doing what you want. A couple weeks ago, I talked about those 2 wolves that live within each of us. Paul shares in multiple different places in his writings about what I want to do, and yet I struggle to do. I think we all relate to that. I know I do. He continues to write, but if you are led by the Spirit, you are not subject to the law. Now, the works of the ego are obvious: fornication, impurity, licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like this. I'm warning you, as I warned you before, those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, I have to be honest and say, because of my upbringing in a religious environment, it can feel sometimes like these are things you don't do, and if you do those, then God gets mad at you. But I think Paul is saying here, you want to inherit God's kingdom, You want to live into this kingdom here and now. It doesn't look like these things. It doesn't look uh, like committing these acts. These acts that we just read are acts that cause brokenness and fracture with our relationship with everyone else. Um, Again, if I jump back here one second, what I love, if I can find it, what I loved about this is in verses 13 and 14. Paul is writing, which is a little bit before this, for you are called to freedom, brothers and sisters, only with brothers and sisters. Paul is specifically saying, we are in a new family here. We are creating new community here. It's going to look different. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves, serving one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single command: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The Enneagram is a tool, might be helpful for us at different aspects of our lives that hopefully help us understand that people are wired differently. Um, if you're human, then you've been in an incident or an event where somebody did something and you thought to yourself, what were they thinking? I would never have done it that way, or I would never have done that thing. Seems so foreign. Well, part of that is because we're different, right? And we all have different core motivations. So maybe a type 2 would do something because it's helpful for others and say, that's my motivation. It's helpful for others. Well, somebody else, a type 3, might say, well, that's great, but we still need to get stuff done. Like this thing still needs to get accomplished, right? A type 4 might have more empathy and say, well, I understand both sides here. I can see that, but what is the most authentic thing that we can do? And we can go around the Enneagram and talk about those different things, but you hopefully, as we talk about the Enneagram, we're learning to love other people who are wired differently than us. I don't know about you, but I need more of that in my life in this season, more love and compassion for people who are wired differently than I am. So then Paul continues. It's a well-known text about the fruit of the Spirit. Again, Paul is saying, one of the things that I love about this text, and I'll read it again, replacing flesh with ego, but I don't think there's a lot of that in this text, is that Paul gets at, hey, folks, like we can hold open certain beliefs that we might see differently. But what really matters is the kind of person we are becoming. In other words, if you're a teacher, if you're a false teacher, he says in other aspects, your fruit will eventually be revealed, like the fruit on a tree. Sometimes we might not see it right away, but the fruit is what matters. In other words, is this person becoming more loving, caring, compassionate? Are they teaching that? Or is the fruit more judgment, hypocrisy, criticalness? So he writes, by contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Which one of these right now speaks to you? Using the Enneagram or not using the Enneagram in your season of your life. By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit, can you use more love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control? I know for me, I think I would say patience right now is what I need more. But what speaks to you? There's always a delay. So I pose a question, but I won't be able to see it for a little bit. So good morning, Janice and John and Kay. Good day to you as well. Paul continues to write, there is no law against such things. And those who belong to Christ have crucified the ego with his passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us be guided by the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, competing against one another, envying one another. Paul, again, is contrasting. What does it mean to be in this new community, this new humanity? What does it look like? I struggle sometimes with Paul's writing because many think his Enneagram type leans, we don't know, but leans to a very one-ish thought process, which sometimes can be black and white. I struggle sometimes with black and white. I like the gray. I like posing the questions. I like wrestling with things. But what is good about black and white type ones is they're great teachers. It's almost like we needed somebody like that to kind of jumpstart and kick off this new kind of faith community. So there's some negativity that has been attributed to Paul that I'm not sure is always completely accurate. But what Paul does is, okay, how do we practically think through what does it look like to create a new kind of community in the midst of all that is going on? By the way, as we begin to venture and think about what does it look like in Three Springs, in many ways, I feel it's a very Paul-like invitation. A Paul who went out from went out from Jerusalem, trying to connect with other people that weren't a part of this thing to start something else. And that's what we're looking at doing, really. And so that's been speaking to me in the back of my mind through all this as well. Sorry, again, I'm jumping around here. Nothing was written out. We don't have internet at our place yet, so I had to come in to the church to do this, and I couldn't even pull it up. So that's partly why I'm jumping all around. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the ego with its passions and its desires. I'm going to end here. This is one that's been hard for me to get a grasp on, because there's part of my training growing up that said, your desires are good. God wants to bless those. God's not going to say, you don't want to do this thing, I'm going to make you do. It's not like God is a masochist, right? But there's this other part that says, no, you need to kill your desires. You need to crucify those things. And through this, actually, maybe I believe a better way of understanding this is when you commit to following the life of Jesus, you're committing to crucify your desire to have that ego be center and saying, no, I'm going to displace that and allow God's Spirit to begin to renew me, to shape me by these fruits. And again, that's going to look differently based on your personality, based on your upbringing, based on all kinds of different things. For some of us, it's easier to be more loving. Twos are some of the most loving people that I know. But for others, having a sense of peace comes easy. For others, having patience comes easy. For others, being faithful and consistent and doing and showing up comes easy. But what does it look like for you as we're going through this Enneagram sermon series and talking about these Enneagram types to grow to a healthier version of you? Not comparing yourself to other people, which I do all the time. As somebody in the heart type, I think it's especially hard, 2s, 3s, and 4s, but we all do this. We all look and compare. But for you, in this season, in your life, here and now, what does it look like for you to be healthy? Coming back to that, what fruit you feel invited into deeper to explore more. So, yeah, I think we'll end there. If you want to share a little bit, I'll stay online. I'll look through these comments, hopefully, if you're willing to share a little bit more. Otherwise, I would appreciate any thoughts or prayers you have to our family as we continue this transition and try to unpack a house after feeling exhausted. So, yeah, thank you all for joining me. And I look forward to seeing your comments of where you feel invited to be a healthier version of you, whether that's the fruit of the Spirit specifically, your Enneagram type, if you know that yet, or just general this season of your life, everything else that's going. What does it look like for you? What do you feel invited to be, to grow, to kind of lean into a little bit more? And we'll talk more about that. All right. Thank you guys so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow